So let's go on to the another concept, that is inheritance. Now let's go on to this inheritance concept. Let's go. Where is this one? Where is ours? Inheritance. So we understood about the specificity. Now let's go on to the inheritance. So now we learn about the inheritance concept. So CSS also has an inheritance. So just like other programming languages and all those things, how the inheritance is there. So here also we have the inheritance concept, but the concept and all those things is different. So we have, by default, CSS has an inheritance. So one thing you people have to understand that the CSS properties, all the properties which we are having, all will have a default value. Okay, all will have a default value. So all the CSS properties, including display, width, so whatever the properties you are having, box sizing, animation, everything, whatever the properties are available, border radius, border, whatever the thing, so whatever the CSS properties that you have seen up to now, all will have a default value. Okay, default value. So it will have a default value. If you try to see any CSS here, let's say that this is a button. If you try to see any CSS, so this is a button, and here if you go to the computed, so these are all the CSS properties applied for this button. Okay, so this is all the button CSS. So we haven't applied any, these all CSS we haven't applied. From A to Z it will be something like, okay, so these all are applied for this button. So we haven't written anything, right? So how come this one is writing means, so these are all the default values. If you try to see WebKit, these all things, width is something around 108 point something. So these are all are having default values, and these default values, some of the values we have overridden. So that is the reason. So these are in something like thick color. Why? Because so these are overridden by either by our user agent style sheet, okay, here, or by user style sheet. So this is our user style sheet. So using by any one of the reason, so we have overridden the initial value. So one thing you people have to understand is every CSS property will have a default value. It will have some value. Okay, whatever it may be the value. So you can check it in the internet or somewhere else. So what is the default values for so and so display? What is the default value for width? What is the default value for height? So like this you can see it. So many things will be there. So but we will not care about that one. But you need to keep in mind, every CSS property has a default value. So don't think that if I declare only that CSS property will be applied. If I don't declare it, that CSS property will not be applied. Like that, don't think like that. Every element has all the CSS property assigned to it, but they have a default values. So that is the one concept. What is the one topic, one point you need to understand it. Now, next point, what we need to do is, so now you understood about this one. So the next thing is, so now we understood for an element, all the CSS is applied and it has a default values. So next comes the user agent style sheet. So here this is called as an browser style sheet. So browser style sheet has some CSS properties. So according to that style sheet, and it will apply those CSS properties. So now these are overridden by this one. Now next you will be having user style sheet. User style sheet means nothing but you people writing. Okay, don't think user agent and this one. So let's try to change it as browser style sheet. Why? Because why I am telling user agent means, so all the times outside you'll be able to see user agent, but you understand that user agent means nothing but a browser. It may be a browser, so all the time it is not a browser. So when we are doing in the backend thing and all those things, the user agent will change. Okay, so that depends. So that is the reason we will be writing it as an user agent. So these are different types of scenarios how we can load the web page. So not only the browser is not only the way which we can load the web page. So there are so many variety of things which we can do it. So those are all different things out of concept. So right now we are accessing the web page only through the browser. So you can think that user agent is nothing but a browser here in this scenario in our examples. Now next one is an user styles. User styles means the styles which you have written. So these styles will be overridden. Now what is the position and order of the preference, right? So the position and order of the preference, now the user styles has been more important, and whatever the styles you mention it here, it is already mentioned before means those all will be overridden by the user styles. So this is another one. Okay. So now let's try to see about the inheritance concept. So inheritance is there in the real life also. So before continuing with this inheritance, you understood about this, the basic thing, how the CSS applies. Now let's go on to the inheritance. What is this inheritance and how this inheritance plays a role in the CSS? Let's try to see. You know about this one. Children inherit their features from the parent. So children means, so for example, we have a parents, and from that parents we can inherit some of the features. Like if your parents are tall, means you'll be your children also will be tall. So like that you'll be having some concepts like that. Okay. you can inherit the properties, wealth, and all those things you can inherit, right? The children. So in the same scenario, the CSS also you will be having. For example, let's say that, let's go to a example. Here I will create a new file, inheritance.html. I am creating an HTML here. Okay, and here I will be having div id is equal to parent. So this is a parent, and here I will be writing this is a parent div. Okay, I will be writing like this. Oh. And here what is this happening? This is a parent div. And now another one, I am taking another one inside this one. Div id is equal to child div. Okay, child div. This is a child, or otherwise child one. Let's take it as child one. This is a child one. So this is a child one. And another one we are having another child 2, and this is a child 2. So now we are having a parent element, and this parent element has two child. That is nothing but child 1 and child 2. Now what I will try to do is, let's try to write this style. So in this style, I will be having hash parent. So for the parent, I am applying the color of red. Okay. So now I am applying to the parent only. So that means, so this parent div. So this is the text element. So these are all two child elements. Okay. So parent to the child. Now if you try to see the output of this one, let's go open with live server. Now if you try to see the output for this one, if you see, this is a parent div, and the child divs which are having, so they are also having the same color, red color, but we haven't applied to the child elements. We have applied only for the parent element, that it should be a color red, but this child elements has also taken the color red. Why? We haven't applied for this child 1 to be color red and child 2 to be color red, but these are inheriting that color property from the parent. So it is taking from the parent. So this is called as an inheritance. If you try to see here, inspect element, and if you try to see it, let's try to see inspect element and see. So this is a parent. Okay, this is a parent. So I have written directly for this parent color red and all those things. Now if you try to see for this one, so here you will be able to see inherited. If you are trying to see here, inherited from the parent. So it is inherited. I haven't explicitly written for this color. So for this one, you have a color computed default property. Something color property you will be having. That is nothing but a black color. Okay. So here you will be having something black color. But here, this default value has been overridden by the parent. So inherited from the parent. I haven't written anything for this child element to have a specific color. But I have mentioned to this parent element. Because of this reason, the child also inherited this property color red. So because of that reason, this is having a color red. So if the parent doesn't have any color red or anything, okay. So if the parent doesn't have any color red or anything, so they will be having their default color. What is the default color for this one? It is a black color. So this one is, every CSS property will have a color, I told you, right? So this is the default value, color 000. This one is in dark grayish color background. So why? Because it is the default color. Default color for this, default color for a color property is black only. If you want to override, then you will override it. So now what I am trying to do here, I am applying to the parent element to change this color of this parent elements to the red color. Now what is happening? This child elements also inheriting the same color property from the parent element, and it is converting that child elements to the color red. So this is the basic inheritance. So how the inheritance works in the CSS. The child element will naturally inherit a CSS property with its value from the parent element if the CSS property is not specified. If the CSS property is not specified for this one, then it will inherit the property from the child element. For example, let's say that I have mentioned hash child1 to be color green. Now what I have did, so I have mentioned for the child1 to be color green. Now what will happen is, this child1 will be having color green. Why? Because it has explicitly have a color for this child. If it doesn't have, means if that property is not set, means then it will take the color from the parent. Now if you see the output here, this one is in color green color, child1. Why? Because we have explicitly mentioned this inherited from the parent has been cancelled and now this one has taken. But if you try to see the child2, we haven't explicitly written any CSS for this one. So that is the reason it will go to the closest to parent. Okay, it will go to the closest to parent. So now it will try to get the parent color. Now let's say that in this child1 I am having, in this child2, let's try to see, I am having another child. So that means div id is equal to grandchild 2, and here this is the grandchild 2, and here I will be having another child. So that is div id is equal to grandchild 1. So this is grandchild 1. So now you are having grandchild 2 and grandchild 1. Now let's try to see the output. So what will happen? If you try to see the output for this one, let's call it, move a little bit down. Now see here, the parent has a color of red. Okay. Now this one is, this text has already, as usual, it will be applied color red. Now this child 1. So this child 1 has a color of green. Okay, has a color of green. So because of the reason, child 1 has applied color green. And this is a grandchild 1. Grandchild 1 means for this parent, this is a grandchild. Now it doesn't have any color. Okay, it doesn't have any color property set to this one. It will go to the closest to parent it is available. So the closest to parent is nothing but a child 1 only. So this child 1 has a color explicitly set to this one, color as green. So what it will try to apply? So it will take the properties from this closest to parent and it will apply the color green. Here you will be able to see inherited from the div child 1, not from the div parent. Now if you go to the div child 2, so this doesn't have any color, explicitly set to this one. So because of that reason, it will go to the closest to parent, that is nothing but a parent, and this has a color set. So now this one will take the color red. Okay, and this grandchild 2. So now it will try to see, it doesn't have a color set to this one, and it will go to the closest parent, and this also doesn't have any color to set, and it will go to the another closest parent. Okay, and it will try to apply that color red for this one. Or otherwise what we can say is, it will go to the closest parent, and what is the color set for this one? It will set automatically. But this color is coming from the parent. So like this, so it will try to take the closest to parent. So because of that reason, so this color red is coming from the parent, but that parent is getting it from the grandparent. Okay, so like this you will be having. So closest to parent, what is the color it is applying? The child it will try to take it. So this is what is the inheritance flow, how it will be in the CSS. So now you will be able to understand. Now you need to have a doubt that you may be getting a doubt that do all the properties are inherited. So do all the properties, for example, let's say that now we are having div id is equal to parent, means whatever the properties I mentioned to this one, width, height, font, everything. So whatever the size, padding, margin, everything, if I apply to this parent, so will all those properties will be inherited to the child? No, all the CSS rules or properties are not inherited. So only some of the CSS rules or properties are only inherited. So there are some lists are available. What I can say is some of the concepts which I mainly use, I will try to tell you. So you can search it in the Google and everywhere also you can see it. So I will tell you some most important thing. Everything which is having font hyphen star. So font size, font weight, font family, like this we will be having so many things, right? So those all are inherited. Color is inherited. Okay. So like this, these are the main things. So these are the main things which you use more often. So some of the things are also there, so which I don't want to go further. So these are all some of the values. These are all inherited. But some of the what I can say, some of the elements are there which are not inherited. So those are most commonly which we will be using is height, width, these are not inherited. Border, margin, padding, so these are all not inherited. So these things are not inherited. So then I will try to show you the concept. So not inherited concept. Let's say that let's remove these all things inside this one. Okay. So this is a div parent, and here I am having a hash parent. So we know that color is inherited to the child. I will try to apply width of 200 pixel and height of 200 pixel. Now the parent has a width, and I will also try to write border 1 pixel solid. So now this one is having, parent is having something like color of red, width of 200 pixel, height of 200 pixel, and border we have applied it. Now let's go on to the child. So I am writing here div id is equal to child1. You can also have class also, not a problem. Just I am to have a clear representation, I am using the id. This is the child div. Okay. Now this child div, okay, for this child div, let's try to have same thing only. So we'll see the output, inheritance. Now if I open this one, now we are able to see the parent div is having a width of around, this parent div is having a width of around 200 pixel by 200 pixel. Okay. So those all border matching and all those things, it will become 202 and all those things. So that is a different concept. We have already learned it. So but this one is having 200 pixel. So parent is having 200 by 200 pixel, and color is red for the parent, not for the child, and border 1 pixel solid only for the parent. If you go to the child, so what are the properties inherited? The properties inherited are only color red. So these are all not inherited. If you try to see the width and height of that one, whatever the content is there for this one element, it is taking only that one, 200 by 18.4. 200 means it will take the entire width, as that property is a block level element, it will take the entire width, but height is around the content, how much it is there, it is taking that same content only. So now you will be able to understand that all the properties are not inherited, only the properties, some of the properties are inheritable properties. Height, width, border, so margin, padding, these all are not inherited. So now the child doesn't have anything. If I try to apply the border for this one, so the border also has not been applied. So now if I try to apply child 1, which has a border of 1 pixel solid, what is this one, 1 pixel solid green or something like this, if I try to mention. Now this one has a border pixel of green. Now we will see, we can able to assume what is the width and height of this one. So the width and height is something like whatever the content it is having, that much content or height only it is taking. Now so this is the concept. So what are the inheritable properties, what are the not inheritable properties? We will be having some list of items, you can see it. So now we understood only some of the properties are inheritable properties and some of the properties are not inheritable properties. We understood. Now can we control this inheritance? So can we able to control this? So now we have seen the default behavior of this inheritance concept. How the browser or how the CSS behaves, we have seen it. So these are all not done by our own. This is done by the CSS algorithm itself. We are trying to learn the algorithm, how it works. What are the values that are inherited and what are the values that are not inherited. So we haven't defined that one, which to be inherited or which to be not inherited. So those are defined like that only. Now we need to customize. So can we control this inheritance? Yes, we can control the inheritance. So now this is the default behavior of the CSS, how it will work, and we can control the inheritance of this one. So there are mainly 4 properties are there in the inheritance to control the inheritance properties. So that is nothing but first property value is inherit, and the next one is initial, and the another one is unset, and the last one is the revert. So using these 4 property values, we can control the inheritance in the CSS. First try to understand this inherit. The inherit means, what I can say is, when you set any property to an inherit, the property takes the value from the parent element. Okay, whenever you set any element property to inherit, that value will be taken from the parent. So this applies not only for the inheritable properties but to all the CSS properties. So that means all the non-inheritable properties and inheritable properties. Every properties, when you mention it as an inherit, it will apply to all of them. Okay, let's say that here, now I want one in such a way that, so now I want to have in such a way that the child element which is having here, okay, the child element, so this is the child element, right? It has to take the same height how much the parent is having. So I want to have the same height how much parent is having. So one thing what I can do, here I can mention, okay, this height is having 200 pixel, okay, fine, whatever happens, I will apply the 200 pixel for this one. This is correct, this fine, this works fine. So now the child element is also having the same height as the parent div. So child div is also having the same height as the parent div. Is this correct? Now tomorrow, the problem is when I change this one to 300 pixel. Okay, parent I have changed it to 300 pixel. Now I need to change whatever the elements, child elements, all the elements are having in this one. I need to change all those elements to the 300 pixel. Why? Because it needs to have exactly like a parent element. In order to overcome this one, so what we can do is, so we can tell that inherit. So we will tell that one inherit the height property value from the parent. So this height is having 300 pixel. So now you have mentioned the inherit here. Automatically this one will take the 300 pixel again. So this one is taking 300 pixel again. If I mention this one parent div, for some reason I have mentioned it to 100 pixel, means automatically there is no need for us to change for the child element also. So now if I try to see, automatically the child also will take the 100 pixel only. Why? Because it is the height is inherited from the parent. So if you try to see here, we have mentioned height as inherit. So that means the height inherit means the value whatever the parent is having. So that value only the child also will have. That is nothing but an 1 or 2. Okay, not 1 or 2, it's 100. So 1 or 2 means because of this border you will be getting. So this is the inherit property. So so this is all about the inherited properties. So whatever the property you want to inherit, you can explicitly mention the inherit. So whatever the thing you want it, you can explicitly mention those all inherit. So for every options you will be having the inherit option. Now another one, let's go to the another one, that is initial. Where is the notepad? Yeah, initial. So initial means, initial value means the initial value. Initial value means it is a CSS property. If you mention it as an initial, any property, if you mention this one as initial, the value will be set to the CSS default value. Okay, CSS default value or initial value also you can say it as. Okay, initial value. So what is the initial value for the color? It is a black. Default values. So those are not user agent styles. Default values. It is a black. So now if you try to see here, the child is having a color of red. Okay, if you try to see this one, okay, the child is having a color of red. I don't want to be inherited from this parent. The color is defaultly inherited. If you don't mention this inherit color inherit also, so if you want you can mention it, but there is no need. Defaultly it will inherit it. I don't want this color to be inherited. I want to take the initial value. So initial value means the default value. So I can mention it as an initial. That's it. So if I mention this one as initial, what will happen? The default color value it will be applied. So that is nothing but a black color. So initial color. So initial color means nothing but this color, not the user agent style color. The best example what I can say is, I'll try to remove this one. Let's say that I am having a div, id is equal to my div. So this is the div, and I am having another one. Let's say that my div 1 and my div 2. This is the div 2 and this is the div 1. And here we are having my div 1 and my div 2. Let's try to remove these all the things. And here we are having two elements, div elements. Let's try to see. If I try to see here, these two are coming one by one down. Why these are coming one by one? You know that these are block level elements. How can you decide these as a block level elements? Just that's a default behavior, browser's default behavior. That is nothing but browser's behavior. So divs are all browser's behavior. So now what this style will try to do is, here if you try to see, in the browser agent style sheet, okay, in the browser agent style sheet, they have mentioned that div element to be display block, okay. So that means they have overridden the display property of this div. So what is the default property of this display property of this div? It is an inline, but the browser has changed it to block level. Now that is the reason we are getting it as one by one. Now what I will try to do here, so here in this style sheet, I don't want this browser default behavior. I want to take this display as inline, not inline, initial. Okay, I am applying this one as initial. Now if I apply this div element, so this element selector I am trying to keep, not the IDs. Anything, if you want to keep IDs also you can keep it. I am trying to change these elements display to initial. Initial means there is nothing but the CSS default value. The display default value is inline, not the block. Okay, for any element, the CSS default value is inline, but the browser will change it to block. That is, user agent style sheet will change it to block. Now I am telling that it should be initial value. It has to be taken the initial value. Then what could be the value of this one? CSS. Let's try to see. Now these two divs are coming side by side. Why? Because it has been set to initial value. I went to page source. Yeah. This has been set to initial value. Initial value means that is nothing but the CSS default value for this display property. So that is nothing but an inline. Now that the block has been striked off and this initial has been applied. So you need to understand the initial value. So initial value always it will set to the CSS initial value. So don't think that div block means it is always block. Why it is block means the browser has set that one to the display block. Default all the elements are inline only. Based on the browser thing, it will take the block element. Now I have told that this one should be an initial means it has took the initial value. Like that every CSS property will have initial value. So everything will have it. So you can take that initial value. Like color has a black color as initial, background is white, background is normally white color, initial value. Like that we'll be having different types of colors. So this is about the initial value. Now let's go on to the another one, unset. Unset is same only. For example, let's say that unset value, what I can say is unset property works on both the inherited and also in the non-inherited property also. What I can say is unset value. So default how it will try to apply is if a value, okay, if a value is inherited means if a value has inherited value means it will inherit it from the parent. If it doesn't have the inherited value means it will take the initial value. So that is the definition what I can say is. In general what I can say is if it has a value, for example let's say that default is unset. Okay, if I mention this one as unset, so if this one has an inheritable property, if it has an inheritable property, okay, so if this one has an inheritable property, then it will inherit it from the parent, or otherwise it will take the initial value. So that is the nothing but, so now here, so display property is not inheritable property, it will set to the automatically to the initial value. So that is a different. So for example, if I try to set, if I am having div id is equal to parent, okay, now I am having div id is equal to parent. So here for this hash parent, I am having color of red, okay. So now what I want to do here, so for this hash parent, inside the parent in the div, I am applying something like color unset, okay. We know that color is a inheritable property. Now it will try to inherit the value from the parent. If it is not there means, so if it is not an inheritable property means you can take, it will automatically take the initial value. So it does the something like that. If it has inherit, now if you try to set the unset, now the parent is having the parent element is having a color and it is set to red. So it is an inheritable property. Now it will try to take the color as a red only. So like this it will try to apply. For the child element you have mentioned is an unset, but it has a color for the parent it has a color red. It is an inheritable property. Color is an inheritable property and the parent has the color, it will try to take it. Or if I try to say that if it is having margin of something like 20 pixel, okay, margin as unset, if you try to mention it, so let's try to see how it will apply. So now if you try to say this one, oh sorry, so parent has a So parent has a, for example, let's say that display parent. So this one is having display as block. So now I will try to set as display as unset. So now display is not an inheritable property. So now this parent is also having the block level element. Then why it will not consider? It will have an inline element. So unset is nothing but it will act so something like an, if it is inheritable property, it will take the inherit, or otherwise it will try to take it from this what I can say, initial value. So why this one we will be using is, for example, you are having something like font size of 20 pixel, and you will be having these all the things you will be having, right? Margin as 20 pixel. So these all the things you will be having. So what you can do is you can say that all as unset. So it will, whatever the inheritable properties are there in the parent element, it will take those inheritable properties, and whatever the non-inheritable properties are there, it will set it to the initial value. So all unset. With using this one, you can mention it, and you can override the whatever the values you want it, you can override it. So like this, the all unset will be useful. So one thing you need to remember that if a inheritable property unset means if a inheritable value is there, means it will inherit the value. If it is not inheritable values, means it will take the initial value. Initial value it will take it. So that is a unset. So we will not use more unset this one, if you understand this inherit and all those things. But it is a worth noting, understanding about the unset value also. Unset value works on the non-inherited properties just like the initial value only. That is the main thing what I can say. If you mention this one margin as unset, means it is nothing but margin you are setting it to initial only. But whereas for this inheritable properties, if you are trying to set it, it will take the what I can say, inherited value. So that's it what I can say. For example, if you try to mention display as unset, and for this one you mention display as block or inline or anything, but this one unset is there, right? It will take the initial value. Unset for the non-inherited properties works just like the initial value. It is nothing but writing like a initial only. Now the next one is the revert. The last one which we need to learn is the revert value. So when you mention this revert, the property value, this one is recently it was introduced. The property value will take the browser style, default style, browser default style. Okay. So for example, let's say that I am having a parent. Okay, I have mentioned this one as display. Let's say that for this parent hash div, I have mentioned this one as display inline. Okay, so now when we don't want to set initial, it is set to the what I can say, it is set to the inline property. So these are inline. Why? Because initial value for this one is this user is, sorry, one second. So initial value for this div display property is inline. Now if you mention this one as revert, okay, if you mention this one as revert, then what will be the default value for this one? This one will be the browser's default value. Browser's default value is nothing but block level element. So now again this one will become block level element. So that is the difference between revert and the what I can say, initial. Initial means it will go to the CSS initial value, whereas revert means it will go to the browser's default value. It will not go to the browser, it will not go to the CSS initial value. So that is the thing you need to understand. So that is normally revert. If you understand this user agent style sheet, initial values and all those things, so these things will be very easy. So revert means it will take the browser default values, whereas the initial means it will take the CSS initial values. So these are the different types of CSS inheritance, how we can control the inheritance in the CSS. So first one we have learned is the inherit, normal inherit. If you want to inherit the value from the parent, you will use this inherit. It will be applicable to both the inherited properties and non-inherited properties. And initial value, it will take the CSS initial value. Unset means inherited values, it will take the inherit, or non-inherited values, it will take the initial value. Initial value for the non-inherited properties. So you can play around these all things. So revert means it will take the browser default value. So if you mention this one, instead of taking, so for example, you have mentioned for this one as initial. You don't want this initial behavior. I want something like browser default behavior, means you can mention that one as revert, so that it will take the browser default value. Okay, so these are the 4 which we are having to control the. So these all 4 we can apply to any element. So margin, border, width, anything you can apply these 4 values. So this is all about the inheritance.